Oh, hello there. Yes, well, we're halfway through the weekend, I'm pleased to say, or not, because that'll mean then that it's Monday sooner, which is dreadful. Anyway, leaving all that work misery aside, might come back to that theme later, it's good to see at the weekend that everyone's, well, keeps on trying British patriot, cough cough, sensible centrist, cough cough. Paul Golding was out in, well, I'd like to say force, but not really, in Nuneaton. March for remigration. Couple of photographs here. You can see if you're very generous, 100? I'm going to be generous about it. I mean, if you can bus in 100 people, I suppose it's something. But one has to admire the sheer array of cheap flags that are there. Yes. What I was going to suggest was, I mean, if you're going to go for something patriotic, then, get yourself something that's actually British. Get yourself a bit of Vivienne Westwood. Why not, eh? Well, of course, that'll cost more, and they only have enough money for their battle bus transit and thing. Anyway, still, there wouldn't have been that much of a rush for the loos, which is good, obviously. I mean, the poor guy's put in so much work and just merely to be outflanked in terms of the racist stuff by actual MPs like Suella Braverman and Rupert Lowe. It's a bit of a shame, really. One's heart does go out to him. He does have a book out, actually, about the history of Islam, and I am actually vaguely tempted to buy it, just so I can see exactly how historically accurate it is. Anyway, speaking of history, something that lefties like myself do like an awful lot. Yeah, we tend to know a lot about history. I remember there was an ancient episode of Secret Army where they, not Rene, but you get the concept, whoever the bar owner was had to go and meet some French communists, and they gave him an instruction that he should never speak to communists about the notion of history, and that's certainly true. Anyway, we arrive at yet another one of those kind of weird end of history things. You may recall that when the Berlin Wall came down, capitalism had won. Hooray, 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 which meant that nothing was ever going to happen again. And then 20 years later, something big did happen because a plane crashed into a building in America. And then 20 years after that, we are, well, metaphorically still crashing buildings with planes one way or another, mainly because we don't have flight controllers because, well, that's just wasteful government spending. But where we are at the moment, of course, is a very ahistorical moment, because it always is, because those people that are staunch defenders of the economic system are always ahistorical. They always believe that we've reached the zenith and that there can be no forward movement. We simply continue forever in the current form of capitalism, even though the current form of capitalism is about 40 years old, and the previous forms of capitalism before that were, well, you can chop it up into blocks, but that's just me knowing things, isn't it? It was struck by Mark Zuckerberg, who, having told everybody a while ago that he definitely wasn't going to have any sort of input as to what went on in his media empire, has decided to have a big input in his media empire. And the opinion section of the Washington Post, probably the most important legacy media in the States, is going to concentrate on the notion of free markets and liberties. But basically what they mean by that is free speech. But one might have thought that basically if you can have an opinion piece, then you need to have all subjects open, that we shouldn't have the closed notion. And of course it's a spurious thing, isn't it? Because free markets, we don't live in a free market. We live in very, 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 very carefully managed capitalism. And the argument currently at the moment, of course, is that awful Mr. Keir Starmer and that awful Mrs. Reeds and the rest of the Labour Party, boo hears, can't manage capitalism, which always gets me to thinking about how well managed capitalism is, because if one thinks back for, well, basically now most of my life, I do have the feeling that I won't see a better economic system before I die. Hopefully I'm going to live for a few more years, folks, because that might be a warning signal, just at that canary in a coal mine there. But anyway, yeah, we can think back to, well, the triumph of the free market, because of course we had the US-backed crushing of any dissenting voices in Chile, where they tried, just very, very free market, Milton-esque if one can put it that way, style libertarian capitalism, and it didn't quite work out. And so they just thought, oh well, never mind, we'll just try that all over again. So they did with, for example, Reagan's America and Margaret Thatcher. And you may recall that at the moment we are having loads and loads of issues because apparently our manufacturing base has been sold down the river, and we need to vastly restructure about the way that we do things because we have a terribly economic thing like transport infrastructure. We have a terribly mismanaged housing market, and we have a terribly mismanaged energy sector. All things, of course, that were, well, basically privatised by the Conservatives, because we were told that that was going to bring us wealth and riches. And then you can think on, slightly further, because we had Tony Blair, hurrah, Labour government, hurrah, 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 that very much triumphed markets, and of course decided to continue to further deregulate things like the financial sector, which was earning us all that money. And you may recall that in 2008 there was a slight hiccup in the entire world economy, and suddenly everyone, suddenly became a lot poorer. Still, never mind, what we needed was a healthy dose of austerity, because that was the only thing that was going to save us. And, that nice Mr. Cameron came in, and with that nice Mr. George Osborne, they were going to balance the books by 2015 because they'd bought into the concept that if you cut spending during a recession, everything will be fine. Because after all, we wouldn't want to listen to that nasty Mr. Keynes, an Englishman, basically, who told us how to do things. No, we want to listen to, a bunch of Austrians or otherwise, don't we? Yes. Now, you may recall that since then, exactly then, 2010, things haven't been exactly rosy. Still, never mind, we could come up with a new wheeze, which is a particular way of, kind of reinventing capitalism. Let's, for example, decide to completely do away with the European market because boo hiss, that's not free markets, is it? No, why can't we just stride our way out into the world with Brexit? And of course we did, and we can see how ecstatically good that worked out, okay? And then, of course, what we had to do was have a very electable Labour Party who couldn't possibly entertain those nasty ideas of that Mr. Corbyn, things like actually, expanding workers' rights and, generally having the people at the bottom get a fairer slice of the cake, because, of course, that isn't the way that it works. That isn't free markets, is it? No, we can't have free markets. So now we have a current government that is too timid to do anything at all, and suddenly we find ourselves completely and utterly adrift. And even the most sensible person can see that the way forwards for us, with a very, 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 very hostile group of people in the States who won't basically do anything other than machete us in our beds late at night, is to have closer integration with the European Union. But we can't have that, and you can start to see all of these kind of things coming together, and the solution is what it always is, that you have to be poorer. I'm not going to say that you have to be poorer, but we're going to hint it. I did have to smile at this from Emma Duncan. Yes, she used to run The Economist. Gosh, you can see where ideologically she comes from. Don't waste this crisis. Use it to cut the welfare bill. Yay! Yes. Do you remember, we've spent a long period of time with various people on the left saying about crisis capitalism and the way that they will just utilise any of these crises to tell you that what you need is more things that produce the crisis, because, hey, that does make a great deal of money for certain people. Hooray! Not you. No, not you. Obviously, that would be foolish. So there we go. Yeah, we can use it to cut the welfare bill, because I'm sure, having spent, I'm just trying to think now, about 50 years of my life with the welfare bill being hacked away at, we can see that it's worked out so well for everybody. Everybody's doing well, aren't they? Well, by everybody, the people in the top 1% are doing excellently. And after all, they're the wealth creators. Imagine how poor we'd be if they weren't so wealthy. It'd be dreadful, wouldn't it? Yes, that's the free market in operation. Can't question it, folks. Certainly not in the Washington Post, anyway, yeah. And of course, then we will be left with this vague notion, of course, that we need to wrap ourselves in very, very cheap Union Jack flags. And we can see a lot of that as well, because, Thinking historically, which is really the theme of this video, I guess we can think back to the 1940s with that great Mr. Churchill. Wasn't he great? Wasn't he great? Wasn't he great? And the current Labour people, boo hiss, are taking down portraits of Mr. Churchill, boo hiss, because we have to have portraits of Churchill. But what's the lesson we get from a radical shift in the nature of world politics from Mr. Churchill? Well, what we get, of course, is that people, having been made very, very poor during a huge recession, which we're on the cusp of, will tend to reject people like Mr. Churchill. That's where we end up, because don't forget, he wasn't the Prime Minister at the end of the war. I'm pretty sure that if I asked Paul Golding, who was the Prime Minister at the end of the war, he'd get it wrong. And I'm pretty sure it'd be the same with Rupert Lowe and all of the others as well, because that isn't a history that you are supposed to think about. But if we really are interested in free speech, and we really are interested in questioning everything, then we do need to question why exactly we've arrived at this point. And the simple solution to all of those difficult problems are that maybe we need to have a damn good look at the economic system, because after all, in Gramscian terms, if nothing else, it's what drives everything else. Yes, that's the way it works. But no, we'll wrap ourselves in the flag and say that we have to kowtow to various people, and we mustn't, whatever we do, talk to the French, because that would be madness. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Churchill wouldn't talk to the French. Anyway, leaving aside inconvenient histories, do have a gorgeous Sunday. Do enjoy the sunshine. Do something lovely. And think for yourself. That's the key thing. Think to yourself. Because the one thing that we can always point to them and say is, it's free speech, isn't it? Yeah, because they're really in favour of that. Unless, of course, it's about Palestine or, our impending doom with the climate. Maybe not then.